Hello. Bon Appetit, The Importance of Food by Maya Smith. First, we're going to watch a short video explaining the importance of food by a food psychologist, David Mark.
Food is delicious. Food is pleasurable. Food can make us feel good. Eating nourishing food, making nourishing food, feeding others, celebrating with others. If that's not love, then what is? Of course, it's always a good time to talk about the power of love. From the instant we're born, the infant's experience of food is directly intertwined with being held, touched, hearing mom's soothing voice, feeling her skin, her warmth, and her love. To the as yet developed nervous system of an infant, all of these experiences are encoded in the nervous system as one event. The infant brain does not distinguish between isolated and specific sensations, meaning the infant doesn't say to itself, oh yes, this is the sound of my mother's voice, and this is the taste of the milk on my tongue, and this is the feeling of love, and this is the warmth of her skin. Again, it's all experienced as one and the same. Food is love. Love is food. Touch is food. Touch is love. And on and on. So to the adult mind, it makes perfect sense that we make the association that food is love. And as we grow older, our nervous system becomes more complex. We have a fascinating way of recreating and evolving this experience of food as love. For many of us, we've been given as children rewards whenever we've done something good or that our parents approve of. Oftentimes, that reward is food. Perhaps your grandparents, your grandmother demonstrated her love by cooking or feeding you, or perhaps it was some other relative or many of them. And maybe even the first time you went out on a date, you eat at a restaurant. It might have even been a romantic setting. Courtship and romance so often occur at the dinner table. Candles, low lighting, music, love is in the air, love is in the food. If you've ever
That video just showed how love and food are intertwined in our brains and how they're hard to differentiate sometimes. My thesis is that food is one of the most important things in everyday life, especially in dealing with the culture, psychology, and the background of a person. My roadmap has four main things. First, the groundwork of taste and explaining how it works. Next, an explanation of psychology and how it affects the food we eat. Then, culture and how it affects the food we eat and what we enjoy. And then the background of a person and how that also affects things. But firstly, we need to understand the groundwork of taste. Taste is achieved when a food goes onto the tongue and interacts with thousands of proteins called taste buds. These taste buds have 5 different senses: sour, bitter, sweet, salty, and umami, a Japanese word meaning the feeling of fat on your mouth. These shape what foods people enjoy by the number of each sense that a person has. If a person has a lower amount of salt taste buds, then they crave more salt and therefore eat more of it in their diet. If a person has a lot of salt, then they don't eat as much of it. This further shapes how the taste buds and what we're born with affects what foods we eat in the long run. Next, I will talk about the psychology of food and how that affects which choices we make and which foods we eat and how much of it we eat. Now, the main reason that we eat food is in order to gain nutrients from them for our bodies and to live a healthy life and keep your body healthy. But there are two main things fighting for which foods you eat: what your body wants and what your brain wants. The brain often tells us to eat foods that stimulate chemicals in the brain and make it happy or have pleasurable sensations. These chemicals can include things like caffeine or even drugs or other things, but these don't really help the rest of our body and keep us healthy. And in order to live a long life, these drugs and other things won't help us very much. Another way that the brain affects this leads to a choice that people have to make about which foods they eat and what is more important, satisfying their brain or eating healthy foods in order to live a healthy life. Another thing that the brain affects when making choices of foods to eat is the fact that sometimes you might eat a food and feel happy, and a healthy food or an unhealthy food. A way that the brain affects how this a way that the brain affects which foods you eat is the fact that if you eat a food that may not be the most healthy, but feel pleasurable and happy while eating it, then your brain helps your body to metabolize it more and get more benefits out of it. This is called the placebo effect, which can also be seen in medical research and in drug testing. They give half of the group the real drug and the other half a fake drug in order to see if the drug really has an effect or if it's just people's brains telling them that it's working. This can affect the foods you eat because if you feel happy while eating a food, then your body gets more out of it. But if you feel stressed and guilty about eating a food, then you get less out of it. And therefore, your body doesn't get as much nutrients and vitamins out of it, and it doesn't help you as much. Now, this is a little brain teaser I have. So, there are 2 white circles that are different sizes and 2 black circles. Now, who thinks that this black circle is different or larger? And then this one? Actually, they're the same size. Now, this affects food because if you're eating a small amount on a large plate, your brain tells you that that's not enough and you need more. Whereas if you eat the same amount on a smaller plate, your brain eats it and thinks it's enough, and your stomach indeed tells you that that was enough food. Your brain and the rest of your body can sometimes compete, and this is another example of it. Another way your brain can trick you into eating more or less food is by the color of the plate. If your food matches the color of the plate, then you will eat more of it. But if it's a different color, then you will eat until your stomach tells you that you're full or until you're done. Next, I will talk about the culture of a person and how it affects the foods that they eat. A definition of culture is a set of standards and lifestyles that are not genetic but are learned. These parts of cultures can be many aspects. Music, language, food, or style and fashion can be the large influencers in culture and how people's cultures are different. Now, everyone's culture is a little bit different than one another, and this largely affects the foods they eat. There are many examples of this in the world, and a photographer named Jason Sun went around the world and took pictures of a week of food and many different cultures. Here are many examples of this and how they differentiate. Firstly, we have the United States. The main thing that separates us from the rest of the world is the fact that in our culture, food is not deemed very important, and we're very quick lifestyle. This affects which foods we eat because we tend to eat more processed foods, ready to go foods, and things that aren't necessarily handmade or home cooked as much. Americans tend to live a quicker lifestyle and therefore feel that they need to eat things that aren't, they don't necessarily value the health of the food, they value the convenience of it. Next, there's Chad, a country in Africa. These people, the main thing that impacts what foods they eat is their economic stance and their environment. Because they live in such a dry area and also have a very poor economic status, their diet mainly consists of rice and beans and other easily grown and cheap food products. Next, there is Japan, a country that's culture and food is mainly defined by its natural resources. The main thing that separates Japan is the fact that it's an island country and is surrounded by the Pacific Ocean. This affects the foods they eat because they mainly consist of a seafood based diet, and a lot of their foods and other things come from the fact that the ocean is a very plentiful resource for them. Finally, there's Ecuador, a Latin country. The main thing that separates their food is not only the low economic status, but also the importance of food and how it affects their culture. In Ecuador, food is one of the main things that brings peoples together. And therefore, even though it's not a lot, the main thing that you can tell from this picture is the smiles on these people's faces. Food is one of the most powerful things that brings the family together and keeps them whole and happy. There's a lot of importance placed on meal times and eating food together. Next, there's the background of a person and how this affects the food that they eat. One of the main things that determines what foods a person eats is the people around them and their influence. What the foods the people around you eat can strongly affect the foods that you indeed consume. Because they eat it and are healthy, your brain tells you that you should eat it as well because others are eating it and are safe. This might expand your food culture into many other aspects and regions that you would have never seen or gone to alone. Another thing that the background of a person can affect their food is the fact that every person has a routine, and food is one of the things that often gets placed in this routine, and what foods and what times they eat. The background of a person can affect what time they eat, how large the meal is, and also what foods they feel comfortable eating and eat on a regular basis. This goes back to the healthiness of foods and how it affects your overall life. If your pattern includes lots of healthy and nutritious fruits and vegetables and whole grains, then you will live a longer life. But if your pattern consists of many unhealthy and processed foods, then your lifespan will be greatly shortened. Also, eating less food tends to make you healthier in the long run and ensures a longer life. Another thing that the background of a person can do is it can bring people together. By sharing a common background or even common roots of a background, people can come together even when they don't seem to have very much in common. This picture further demonstrates how culture and the background of a person can affect many different aspects of their life, not just the dinner table. It can affect their health, the society as a whole, the economy, and the education system. These things all wrap around to create a person and instilled in them is a certain background and culture that can be shared with others through something as simple as creating a meal. Going off of this, part of the Big Board project was doing a community outreach. For my community outreach, I decided to do a cultural awareness potluck. The basis of this potluck was to have many people from many different cultures and backgrounds bring a dish that symbolizes their background or culture, or one that they often make at family gatherings or special occasions. Even though making a dish that shows your culture might seem simple, the overall potluck and the effect was very powerful. This potluck helped to bring together many people who otherwise probably would not have interacted. The power of the food was that it was something basic and simple that every human needs, but there are many different takes on food, and therefore many different cultures. And through the potluck and learning about other people and where they came from, I feel like everyone gained a lot of a positive experience and it opened their eyes to the world more. Even though we're not all the exact same, it's interesting and exciting to learn about others who are different than us, even though we might think we're the best. So during my potluck, as you can see from the pictures, there are all kinds of dishes, including ones from the Southern America, the Middle East, Europe, and also the South American countries. Another thing that the potluck inspired was a talk about where people came from and how they got to Seaham High School. One of the things that I had done for this potluck was invite the English as a second language students, foreign exchange students, and the students in Flex. Together, we all discussed our backgrounds and our families and the importance of the dishes that we made to us and our families and what they represented and when we ate them. This food ultimately opened up a conversation about a girl pictured here telling her story of how she came to America from Jordan in the Middle East and how much there was a culture shock, but how she ultimately assimilated into the American culture while still keeping roots of her own, including speaking Arabic and also reading it. Though she sometimes feels different, she ultimately feels that Seaham is her home and a place to feel safe and happy with others. And the food was one of the things that brought us together, and now we're friends. And she made many other friends in this experience. She had just moved 3 weeks ago, but through the power of food and culture, we became friends, and she even gained other friends. Food is one of the most powerful and important things in everyday life, and it should be treated as such. Thank you for your time. Any questions?